Welcome to HFY Aliens Battle, where humanity proves time and time again that we are not to be underestimated. If you love stories of human resilience, bravery, and defiance against overwhelming odds, you're in the right place. Subscribe now to HFY Aliens Battle and never miss a fight for humanity's survival. Hit the bell icon so you're always ready for the next battle. Now, let's dive into today's story, The Calm Before the Storm. The sun over Outpost 47 wasn't like the warm golden glow of Earth's sky. Instead, it was a distant dying star, a dull red ember barely strong enough to light the barren landscape. The colony sat on a rocky plateau, surrounded by jagged cliffs and deep crevices. To outsiders, it looked desolate, forgotten. To the colonists, it was home. For the past 20 years, humans had worked the mines beneath the surface, extracting rare minerals that fueled the vast industries of the core worlds. It was hard work, but it was honest. The people here weren't soldiers. They were engineers, scientists, farmers, traders, ordinary men and women who had come to the far edge of space seeking opportunity. Only one man among them had ever known, War. Colonel Elias Grant, once a decorated officer in the Terran Defense Corps, had chosen to retire here, far away from the conflicts of the past. His days of fighting were long behind him. At least that's what he had thought. The colony was peaceful. The days passed with the steady rhythm of mining drills and trade convoys. The biggest concerns were equipment failures and supply delays. But peace was a fragile thing, and today, it was about to shatter. The first signs of trouble, it started with a single blip on the long-range scanner. At first, the colony's radar technician, Mira Lawson, thought it was just another asteroid drifting through space. The system had plenty of those. But something about its movement felt wrong. Too fast, too direct. She ran a second scan, then a third. Her stomach tightened. The blip wasn't alone. "Colonel Grant," she called, her voice tense. "You need to see this." Grant had been in the middle of his morning routine, black coffee, a quiet walk around the perimeter, watching the horizon like an old habit he could never break. But when he heard the urgency in Mira's voice, he set the cup down and headed for the control center. The moment he saw the screen, he knew. Multiple unidentified vessels inbound. Estimated time to contact, 6 hours. The room fell silent. "Could be a trade convoy," someone muttered. "Or maybe pirates." But Grant knew better. He had spent decades fighting wars on the fringes of space. He had seen this exact formation before. "That's not a trade convoy," he said grimly. "That's an invasion force." A cold wave of fear washed over the room. The colony had no warships, no military defenses. Just a few security drones and mining tools. "What do we do?" Mira asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Grant clenched his jaw. There was only one option. We prepare to fight. The enemy revealed. The 6 hours passed too quickly. Every colonist was glued to the sky, watching as the first ships broke through the upper atmosphere. The vessels were massive, sleek, black behemoths that blotted out the stars. They moved with eerie precision, forming a blockade around the colony like a tightening noose. Then, a message came through. The voice was deep, guttural, filled with the confidence of a predator addressing its prey. "This world belongs to the Khazrath now. Surrender, and you will be spared. Resist, and you will be erased." A holographic image flickered to life in the control center. The Khazrath warlord stood tall, towering over any human. His thick, scaled hide shimmered under the glow of his command deck. Cold yellow eyes locked onto the camera, filled with amusement, as if he already knew the answer but was giving the humans a chance to beg anyway. No one spoke. No one moved. Every colonist turned to Colonel Grant. Slowly, he stepped forward, his expression carved from stone. He leaned in, staring directly into the warlord's eyes, and with a voice that held no fear, he spoke. "We don't kneel." The warlord's amusement vanished. His slit-pupiled eyes narrowed. "Then you will burn." The transmission cut. Outside, the alien ships began their descent. The battle for Outpost 47 had begun, turning miners into warriors. The moment the transmission ended, Colonel Grant turned to the crowd of colonists gathered in the control center. Their faces were pale, their hands trembling. These people weren't soldiers. They had never seen war. But that didn't matter anymore. "If we wait for them to strike first, we're dead," Grant said, his voice steady. "We don't have warships, we don't have an army. But we have something better. Our minds, our hands, and our will. If we fight smart, we make them bleed. If we make them bleed, we make them think twice." He let that sink in. No one spoke. No one moved. But then Mira stepped forward, squaring her shoulders. "What do you need us to do?" Grant nodded. That was all he needed to hear. "Engineers, I need traps. We turn this colony into a fortress. Weak points in the terrain, choke points, anything that can be used against them. Set up barricades, collapse tunnels, make them fight for every inch." The engineers nodded and rushed off. "Miners, you know the tunnels better than anyone. We need explosives, anything that can be rigged for controlled detonations. We'll use the mines against them." The foreman, a burly man named Jonas Pike, grunted. "We've got enough charges to take down a mountain. We'll make it work. Farmers, traders, anyone who can hold a weapon, we arm you with whatever we've got. Mining lasers, welding torches, repurposed tools, anything that can punch through armor." A murmur ran through the group. Fear, uncertainty. Then an old woman, Margaret Henshaw, who had run the colony's food supply for over a decade, stepped forward. She was pushing 70, but her hands were steady as she picked up a modified mining rifle. "If this is our home," she said, "then we fight for it." The fear in the room didn't disappear, but something else took its place. Determination. Colonel Grant looked at them all, one final time. These weren't soldiers. But by the time the Kizrath landed, they would be warriors. The first wave. The ground trembled as the Kizrath dropships slammed into the rocky terrain outside the colony. Their hulls hissed as they cooled from re-entry, steam rising like ghosts in the dim red light of the fading sun. Then, the hatches opened. The first wave of invaders poured out. Hulking reptilian warriors in segmented black armor, their eyes gleaming with cruel anticipation. They moved with confidence, their weapons raised, expecting no resistance. They were wrong. The moment the first Kizrath warrior stepped forward, the ground beneath him collapsed. A hidden shaft, one of the colony's old mining tunnels, swallowed him whole. His guttural scream was cut short by the jagged rocks below. Then the real fight began. From behind makeshift barricades, the colonists opened fire. Mining lasers burned through armor. Plasma cutters, originally designed for slicing through metal, cut down the enemy just as easily. Crude explosives, improvised from mining charges, detonated in controlled bursts, turning the battlefield into a storm of fire and shrapnel. The Kizrath snarled in surprise. This was not the helpless slaughter they had anticipated. They had underestimated humanity. Colonel Grant stood at the front lines, his old rifle steady in his hands. His voice cut through the chaos, barking orders, keeping the colonists moving, fighting, surviving. "Hold your positions," he roared. "Don't let them break through." For the first time in their long history of conquest, the Kizrath hesitated. They had expected fear. Instead, they found defiance. And for the first time, they realized this would not be an easy victory. The cost of defiant smoke and fire choked the colony streets. The air smelled of scorched metal and burning flesh. The first wave of Khazrath warriors had been driven back, their dead littering the battlefield. But the victory had come at a price. Margaret Henshaw lay slumped against a crate, her mining rifle still clutched in her hands. A plasma blast had torn through her side, but she had fought until the very end. Jonas Pike knelt beside her, jaw clenched, eyes filled with grief. "We lost too many," Mira whispered, her face streaked with dirt and blood. Grant scanned the battlefield. The makeshift barricades had been reduced to rubble. Ammunition was running low. The wounded outnumbered the medics, and the Khazrath weren't done yet. From the ridge beyond the colony, new ships were landing. These weren't ordinary foot soldiers. Heavies, larger, stronger, armed with energy shields and heavier weaponry. Grant took a slow breath. He had seen this before. The first wave had been a test. Now the real slaughter would begin, but something flickered in his mind. An old tactic from a war long past. The kind of strategy that didn't rely on brute force, but on deception. "We can't win a direct fight," he said, his voice steady. "But we can make them think we already have." Mira frowned. "What do you mean?" "We set a trap." He turned to the remaining engineers. "Collapse the main tunnel entrance. Make it look like we're retreating underground. Make them think we're cornered." Jonas' eyes widened. "And when they come in after us?" Grant's expression was grim. "We bury them." The colonists exchanged glances. The plan was risky. If it failed, they'd all be dead. But then, Jonas pushed himself up, wiping the blood from his forehead. "Then, let's make sure it works." Around him, the others nodded. The fight wasn't over. Not yet. Luring the beast into the trap. The colony fell eerily silent. Fires still smoldered, casting flickering shadows against the cracked walls. The dead lay where they had fallen, their weapons still clutched in stiff hands. To the Khazrath, it looked like a battlefield already won. From their vantage point, the warlord watched with cold satisfaction. The humans had fought harder than expected, but they had broken. Their survivors had fled underground, retreating into the mining tunnels like frightened prey, exactly as he expected. With a flick of his clawed hand, he signaled his elite forces forward. The heavies marched with mechanical precision, their reinforced armor reflecting the firelight. The plan was simple: follow the humans into their tunnels, corner them, and erase them from existence. But as the first Khazrath soldier stepped inside, the ground gave a hollow groan beneath his feet. The moment the 10th warrior entered, the trap was sprung. Boom! A chain of explosives detonated in perfect sequence, collapsing the tunnel entrance behind them. The aliens inside were instantly entombed. The warlord snarled, his eyes widening in rage. "Fools! Do they think burying themselves will save them?" He turned to his second-in-command. "Break through the rubble. We'll rip them apart stone by stone!" But as his warriors rushed to clear the collapse, none of them noticed the blinking red lights scattered across the battlefield. More charges. And then the entire colony exploded, fire and fury. The detonation ripped through Outpost 47 like a vengeful storm. Explosives, rigged to the colony's remaining infrastructure, turned buildings into fireballs. Shockwaves blasted through the battlefield, sending debris and bodies flying. The Khazrath warlord barely had time to react before the ground beneath him cracked apart. The sheer force of the explosion sent him crashing onto the rocky terrain, his elite forces thrown into chaos. What had once been a battlefield was now a graveyard, but the humans weren't buried. From the hidden side tunnels, routes only the colonists knew, Grant and his people emerged, weapons ready. Their faces were streaked with soot and blood, their bodies battered, but their eyes burned with something the Khazrath had never understood: rage, determination, survival. Grant didn't waste time. Hit them now, while they're scattered. The colonists surged forward. Mining lasers carved through the dazed alien warriors. Plasma cutters tore through armor. The Khazrath, once so sure of their victory, were now fighting just to survive. Die! Warlord roared in fury, rising to his feet. His golden eyes locked onto Grant. You think this changes anything, human? Grant leveled his rifle at the towering alien. His voice was calm. It already has. Then, he pulled the trigger. The warlord staggered back, a smoking hole in his chest. He snarled, reaching for his weapon. Boom! Another explosion, this time right beneath his feet. The final set of charges, timed perfectly. The warlord vanished, in a fireball, and with him the last hope of Khazrath victory burned to ash. The aftermath of battle. The battlefield fell silent. The fire still burned, casting an eerie glow over the shattered colony. Smoke curled into the sky, carrying the scent of scorched metal and alien blood. The Khazrath were defeated. Their ships lay in ruins, their warriors slain. The few survivors, wounded and disoriented, stumbled back toward their remaining shuttles, desperate to escape. But the humans stood tall. Mira lowered her weapon, her hands shaking from exhaustion. Jonas wiped blood from his face, scanning the battlefield for survivors. Grant exhaled slowly, his rifle still warm in his grip. They had done the impossible. Outpost 47 had stood against an empire and won, but at a cost. Bodies of colonists lay among the wreckage. Friends, family, brave souls who had fought with nothing but mining tools and sheer determination. Margaret, Henshaw, gone. Half the engineering crew, gone. They had survived, but survival always had a price. Mira turned to Grant. What now? He looked at the ruins of their home. The colony was barely standing, but the people were still here. And that meant they weren't done. We rebuild, he said. And if the Khazrath come back? Jonas cracked a grim smile. Then we show them why humans never surrender. Above them, the first hints of dawn broke through the smoke-filled sky. Outpost 47 still stood, and so did humanity. A message to the stars. As the sun rose over the wreckage of Outpost 47, the remaining colonists gathered in the control center. The communications array was barely operational, its circuits fried from the battle, but it would be enough. Mira adjusted, the signal clearing the static. We're live. Grant stepped forward. His uniform was torn, his body bruised, but his voice was steady. He looked into the transmitter, knowing that on the other end human colonies across the galaxy would be listening. This is Colonel James Grant of Outpost 47, he began. We were attacked by the Khazrath Empire. They thought we would fall. They thought we would kneel. He took a breath. They were wrong. A murmur ran through the colonists, quiet but filled with pride. We are still here. We fought and we won. And if they come again, we'll be ready. His eyes hardened. So let this message be heard across the stars. Humanity does not break. Humanity does not surrender. And if you come for us, be ready to pay the price. Mira nodded and ended the transmission. For a long moment there was silence. Then Jonas chuckled, shaking his head. Think they got the message? Grant looked at the burning wreckage of the alien ships, the battered but standing colony, and the unyielding faces of his people. Oh, they got it, he said. Far beyond the stars, in the war chambers of the Khazrath Empire, a warning signal blinked to life. The humans had sent a message, and the galaxy would never forget it. The end.